Good evening, friends. This is Shana from Porter Square Books again. I am here to read you your evening bedtime story. Tonight, I'm going to be reading to you from one of my favorite books, In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. This is a book that I've actually loved since before it was published because she initially put it on the internet just in serial form and then eventually gathered it into a real book. The real book is obviously much more finished and wonderful, but it's just very creative and clever, and not really like any other portal fiction you'll read. So, In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. Let's go. Oh, we have some art today. Art to start it out with of the main three kids. Elliot, age 13. So far, magic school was total rubbish. Elliot sat on the fence bisecting two fields and brooded tragically over his wrongs. He had been plucked from geography class, one of his most interesting classes, to take some kind of scholarship test out in the wild. Elliot and three other kids from his class had been packed into a van by their harassed-looking French teacher and driven outside the city. Elliot objected because after an hour in a moving vehicle, he would be violently sick. The other kids objected because after an hour in a moving vehicle, they would be violently sick of Elliot. Elliot ignored the other kids and hung his head out of the window in a disdainful way. Then they arrived at their destination, which could only be described as a classic example of a random field in Devon, England, much like any other random field in Devon, England. "Why are we in a random field?" Elliot demanded. "I will thump you," promised Desmond Dobbs. "Zip it." "I will not be silenced," said Elliot. He would not be silenced, but he was feeling unwell, and being thumped usually made him feel worse, so he stood a little way off from the others and observed their surroundings. The random field boasted a stone wall so high Elliot could not see over the top, and a woman wearing extremely odd clothing who appeared to be waiting for them. She and their French teacher had a quiet conference, and as Elliot watched them, he saw money change hands. "Excuse me, did anyone else see that?" Elliot asked. "I don't wish to alarm anyone, but get alarmed because I think our French teacher just sold us." "They haven't sold us," said Ashley Sinclair. "Nobody would want to buy you." That did silence Elliot. It seemed so indisputably true. The woman in the odd clothing tested him by asking him if he could see a wall standing in the middle of the field. When he told her, "Obviously, because it's a wall, walls tend to be obvious," she had pointed out that the other kids blithely walked through the wall as if it were not there, and told him that he was one of the chosen few with the sight. "Are you telling me that I have magical powers?" Elliot had asked, excited for a moment, and then added, "Because I can't walk through walls? That doesn't seem right." The woman had told him that she was prepared for questions, but she did not seem prepared for that one. She blinked and told him to come away with her to a magical land. "By a magical land," she told him, "I mean a place that not everybody can see. A place with..." "With mermaids?" Elliot asked. "I don't need you to explain to me the concept of a magical land filled with fantastic creatures that only certain special children can enter. I am acquainted with the last several centuries of pop culture. There are books and cartoons for the illiterate." "Look," said the woman, "are you prepared to come away with me or not?" Normally, Elliot refused weird propositions from potentially demented strangers, but there was the wall, and the undeniable fact that other people could not see it or touch it. And this really was like something out of a book. Elliot did not think he would be able to live with the curiosity if he did not go. "Okay," Elliot said, finally, brandishing his phone in the woman's face, "but I have the number of the police, and I will have my finger on the call button at all times, just in case you are a child predator." She rolled her eyes, but she let him keep the phone with no objections. Nobody else had any objections when it was explained that the strange woman would be driving Elliot back to school later. Nobody pointed out that there was no sign of the strange woman's car. Desmond Dodd said, "Hooray!" "Do you have family who will miss you?" asked the woman while everyone else piled into the van. "Ha!" said Elliot. "That is a serial killer question, and I refuse to answer it." "Any family you have will be told that you were offered a last-minute scholarship to a prestigious military school," said the woman, "if you choose to stay." Will anyone be worried about you? The van set off down the road. It seemed to get smaller very fast, heading toward the distant gray horizon of the city. Everything Elliot knew seemed terribly small and terribly gray and terribly far away. Elliot hesitated. No. Once the van had disappeared around a bend in the road, the strange woman led Elliot up a narrow stone stairway built into the wall. They climbed and climbed, and when they had gone so high that they were surrounded by clouds, they walked through a shining hole in the wall and onto soft grass. Actually, the magical land seemed to be mostly grass. There were fields, more fields, several more fields, a couple of rough round stone towers, which men with weapons were exiting and entering. Elliot had cheered up when he saw a man walk by, books under his arms, who had long hair and pointed ears. There were elves and dwarves, like from fairy tales, men and women alike with beards and carrying elaborately carved hammers. He looked around for other marvels. Mostly, there were other kids. Some of them were quite big, and some of them looked no more than Elliot's age. He was 13, though everybody thought he was younger because they had made cruel assumptions based on height. All the kids had lined up at different tables to be signed in, and now the kids Elliot's age were all standing together in a cluster, waiting to be told what to do. Elliot turned toward the woman who had led him here. Her clothing did not look so strange here, where a lot of people were wearing breeches and buckles all over. He had only known her for 5 minutes, which made her 5 minutes more familiar than anyone else. Under cornrows that ended in a black coronet of twisted hair, her face was impatient but not unkind. Is this the part where I get told only I can save the magical land? This is the part where you get trained, said the woman. Or not. You choose. Trained for what? Elliot demanded, but the woman had already strode off to be cryptic elsewhere and left him with a good group of kids his age. He was slightly alarmed. The wall on the other side had been low, but carved with graffiti, so he suspected there were vandals about. His phone was sizzling, and now this. It was so unfair. Elliot had not expected a magical land to be all fields. Some of the fields had cows in them, and he was pretty sure they weren't magic cows. And other kids. Elliot especially did not like the other kids aspect of a magic land. Elliot does not interact well with peers on all his report cards. If the teachers had been more precise, what they would have said is, does not shut up well around stupid people. But that was teachers for you. And there were always kids who were stunned when crossed, as if they had expected that life would go their way forever. Elliot had already spotted the 2 kids who looked as if they thought life was a song. Practically all of the relatively few girls were staring at them. One of the boringly human pairs of boys, the obvious leader, was tall and broad-shouldered, with golden hair, as if nature had said, "No worries, buddy, I gotcha. No nasty, tiring thinking will ever be necessary. Also, have a crown." The other had a bright, vacant smile that someone, finding it empty, had filled with light. The blonde guy was wandering around from kid to kid, talking kindly to them, and taking hold of them by one shoulder with the patronizing air of a kid who thought he was as good and wise as a teacher. He knelt and spoke to one much smaller girl in a My Little Pony t-shirt, then rose to his feet and turned away, leaving her staring after him with shining eyes, as he obviously forgot all about her, as if he were king dispensing largesse to the peasants. The other boy was following the blonde guy around, nodding at everything he said. Both of them looked entirely self-assured about the whole situation. Elliot knew their type. The blonde boy looked like he would throw the first punch, and the smiling boy looked like he would throw the second and third in eager imitation. Elliot mentally christened them Blondie and Surfer Dude. He peered around the woods, where perhaps there were more elves, and to the sky, where he was almost sure he'd saw something that was winged, but too big to be a bird. A cough distracted Elliot from his perusal of the skies. He looked into blue eyes and saw that it was apparently Elliot's turn on the condescension rounds. "You should stop sitting on that fence," Blondie instructed. "Oh, I see," Elliot muttered darkly. "Even this is to be taken from me." Nobody Elliot was aware of had made Blondie the boss of the fence, but being tipped over backward into the mud was not Elliot's idea of a good time. He slipped off the fence and looked resentfully up at Blondie, and, of course, his sunny shadow. He found tall people tiresome. Elliot scowled. Blondie frowned. Surfer Dude kept smiling. "Don't worry, little guy. I know this must be all very confusing for people from the other side of the border, said Blondie. Elliot stared for a long moment. The moment grew uncomfortable. Elliot was glad. This is all terribly confusing, Elliot agreed. Blondie smiled, relieved, and Elliot held up a hand to stop him saying anything. I was so hoping, Elliot said, continued soulfully, that someone would come explain this all to me, preferably someone who would do it in small words. And you two look like the small word type. Sure, what do you need explained? Asked Surfer Dude. Elliot rolled his eyes and saw that Blondie's sweet blue eyes had narrowed. He tilted his head and grinned. First off, this, said Elliot, and produced his phone from his pocket. It looked a bit melty and was sending off sparks. Surfer Dude took a step back. You'd better give me that, said Blondie. You could hurt yourself. He stepped forward. Elliot took a step to the side, and the group as a whole moved away from Elliot. Everyone had discarded their technology when it malfunctioned, because they were quitters. Nope, said Elliot. It's mine. I think it's about to go on fire. It's my thing that's about to go on fire and not yours, Elliot said firmly. Now, why have all our methods of communication just literally gone up in smoke? Are we kidnapped? Are we going to be ritual sacrifices? Is there some sort of magical spell that destroys our ability to call for help? A distressed murmuring spread through the group. Blondie looked around in dismay. No, he said. Everything's fine. Your little gadgets from across the border just don't work here, that's all. They never have. You don't need them here. Of course not, Elliot murmured. The Industrial Revolution was a silly business anyway. Everybody looked confused now, not just Surfer Dude. Elliot raised his voice. Are you telling me none of us are going to be able to play video games? Blondie looked as if like he had his doubts about answering, but he did anyway. I'm not sure what a video game is, but I'm pretty sure you can't play them here. One of the other boys, who judging from his clothes was from what Blondie called the other side of the border, and Elliot called the real world where stuff made sense and phones did not explode, burst into tears. Blondie's head whipped around. Oh no, Elliot exclaimed sadly. Look what you did. I didn't. He seems awfully upset, Elliot continued. You really must feel bad. Blondie did not look as if he felt bad at all. He looked, in fact, like as if he were going to punch Elliot in the face. He took a deep breath and did not, which was a pleasant surprise and made Elliot feel quite cheerful. Go on then, Elliot said brightly and made an encouraging yet dismissive gesture. See to the children. Blondie turned and moved toward the crying boy, but he glanced back over his shoulder at Elliot, eyes still narrowed. Not everyone who can see the border belongs on the right side, he observed. Being trained to protect the border is a sacred duty, and my father says that some people are too weak and too concerned with their own comfort to fight the good fight. That's fascinating. Run along. You can choose to go or stay, said Blondie. So I don't think I'll be seeing you again. Yes, oh my God, I already understood the implication that I wasn't man enough to tough it out beyond the border. Your attempt at an insult was extremely clear, Elliot informed her. You're just making the whole thing labored and awkward now. He waved Blondie away again, and on Blondie's retreat, Elliot squinted suspiciously up at Surfer Dude. When he said all that stuff about duty and protection, he said, is this a military operation? Surfer Dude looked pleased to be asked. Yes, they train you up, those who can pass through the border on either side, to be guards and keep the peace between the people in this land and those who may come up through the other. You learn how to handle all sorts of weapons, how to form a unit, all this cool stuff. Oh my God, Elliot said in a hollow voice. We're child soldiers? He considered this and then said, I need to sit down. I'm going back to the fence. You're not supposed to, Surfer Dude said, echoing his master, but Elliot was already walking away. He did take Surfer Dude's point, and he did not want to be pushed off the fence, so meandered along it for a little, moving further away from the group. And as he did so, he came to the sight of someone else who was standing slightly removed from the crowd. She turned as Elliot approached. She was tall, slim, and strong-looking as a young birch tree, and as she turned, her long dark hair spun out in a steadily blowing wind. It formed a trail of darkness, touched by autumn leaves twined around her tresses. Her pale face stood out in sharp relief. So did the pearl-pale curling points of her ears. This was an elf maiden. This was, bar none, the coolest person Elliot had ever seen. Elliot only had to look at her solemn face for one long moment, robbed of breath by both the wind and her beauty, and he knew. This was love, not the passing fancy he'd felt for Miss Tolliver, his music teacher, in which he'd become confused by having a good relationship with an authority figure, or Simon Bay, confused by admiration for his skill in their shared art project, or Claire Winters. The guidance council had approved and hadn't said Elliot was confused, but Claire had turned out to only understand a quarter of Elliot's joke, so she'd been confused all the time. Elliot wasn't confused now, looking into those clear eyes, at once dark and bright like pools in a great forest. He tried to collect himself. Now was no time to stare like a hypnotized sheep. Now was the time to woo. He had not seen any other elven girls in the whole camp, so clearly she was defying conservative elven customs by coming here, brave and alone, and the victim of cruel oppression. Elliot's heart went out to her. She was probably feeling scared and shy. "Hello," said the beautiful elven maid. "I was just thinking, and I mean no offense, but how can any fighting force crowded with the softer sex hope to prevail in battle?" "Huh?" said Elliot brilliantly. "The softer what?" "I refer to men," said the elf girl. "Naturally, I was aware the border guard admitted men, and I support men in their endeavor to prove they are equal to women, but their natures are not warlike, are they?" Elliot offered after a long pause. "I don't enjoy fighting." She favored him with a slow smile, like dawn light spreading on the water. "Very natural." "In fact," Elliot confessed, encouraged, "I never fight." "You should not have to," she said. "There should always be a woman ready to protect a man in need. I take it you are bound for the council course, then?" "I don't understand," said Elliot, and then he shamelessly looked up at her. Taller. Why was everybody taller? Through his eyelashes and confessed, "I'm from the other side of the border, and this is all a little overwhelming." "And distressing?" Yes, Elliot felt like he was definitely distressed. "And distressing," he added with conviction. "If you would be so kind as to explain a few things to me, I would so appreciate it." He was going for a combination of shy and winsome. As he had never tried to act like this ever before, he wasn't sure how well he was succeeding, but the elf maid unbent further. So he couldn't be doing too badly. "Certainly," she said, and offered him her arm. Elliot, a quick study, accepted it with a sweet smile. The council course is a course in diplomacy, mapping the lands to this side of the border, learning about other cultures. Elven culture, for instance, is quite different from humans. "I am beginning to see that." "War training is seen as the more prestigious, and has far more recruits," said the elf. "That is totally unreasonable. These people are idiots. I suspected it all along." "You are very forthright for a man," said the elvish maiden. "But I understand that human men are not reared as delicately as elven gentlemen. I agree with you, moreover. Both courses should be considered equally important." Elliot had not said that, but he was already unbecomingly forthright, so he fluttered his eyelashes and remained demurely silent. He did not think his demure silence thing was going to work out, because he was only able to keep it up for a minute. "What's your name?" "Serene." "Serena?" Elliot asked. "Serene," said Serene. "My full name is Serene Heart in the Chaos of Battle." Elliot's mouth fell open. "That is badass." Serene's serious countenance did not change, but Elliot felt a subtle shift of that slim body. He was fairly certain she was preening. "I'm Elliot Schaefer," he added. "A strange name," said Serene, adding gallantly, "but not unpleasant." Take that, every jerk at school who had ever laughed at Elliot's name. No badass elf maidens had ever told them their names were not unpleasing, had they? "Are you interested in the cultures of the borderland?" Serene asked in a curious tone. "Super interested," declared Elliot. "When you said peoples, you mean humans, elves, dwarves, and..." Please say mermaids, he thought. Please say something cool with wings. "Mermaids," said Serene. He could have kissed her. He would have been very delighted to kiss her. "Trolls, harpies, centaurs, dryads, and various other people." "Badass," Elliot whispered again. That was when they both noted that the woman in odd clothes was there again. She turned out to be called Captain Woodsinger, and she was collecting them all for a roll call, which Elliot thought was ridiculous considering they had just lined up to sign into the border training camp. He cheered up when she started reading out names, and Blondie turned out to be called Luke Sunburn. Sunborn, hissed Surfer Dude, once Elliot was done loudly making fun of this. He's called Luke Sunborn. Of the Sunborns, you know? I don't, said Elliot, and I don't want to. Centuries ago, the first humans came across the border to the other lands, Surfer Dude recited, as if this were a lesson he'd learned long ago. Humans settled in this country near the border and lived among the creatures here and brought peace to the borderlands. He added serene as he said creatures, which Elliot thought was an odd way to look at the most beautiful and badass girl in the world. Elliot glanced at Serene, then back to Dale. So this place is the other lands? Depends on your point of view. Depends on your point of view, said Serene. Some people call where you come from the other lands. It is, after all, on the other side of the border. Though Elliot enjoyed debate, he was currently on an information-gathering mission. This country is called the Borderlands, though, he said, and the border means the giant magic wall? Surfer Dude nodded and smiled his happy smile. Yes. And humans come from across the border, Elliot said. Did we invade? He leaned forward. Tell me right now, are we engaged in a system of colonial oppression? The boy's happy smile melted away, like ice cream in relentless verbal sunshine. I don't know, said Surfer Dude helplessly, what most of the words you just used means. There are small communities of humans all over the borderlands, said Serene. They call the communities villages, and the border guard established a law that must be kept throughout the land and enforce that law. Elves can consider the humans useful allies, certainly more to be trusted than the dwarves, or the trolls. A dark look crossed her face. Do not get me started on the trolls. I want you to talk to me about trolls at length, but perhaps another time, said Elliot. So elves call this country the Borderlands as well? A small smile, almost imperceptible, paused across Serene's face. Not in Elvish. Elliot thought it was possible she was messing with him. What a babe. And this is the training camp for the border guard, the people who make up all the laws and enforce them. The border guard is partly kids from across the wall and partly kids from the borderland villages. But mostly, Surfer's Dude's smile resurrected itself. The backbone of the border guard are the families who settled in the fortresses built along the border itself centuries ago and have protected it ever since, raising their sons in the tradition. He buffed his nails on his leather jerkin. He and Captain Woodsinger and Luke, apparently not Sunburn, and many of the other humans were dressed like that, and had a lot of leather and straps. It looked pretty ridiculous to Elliot, especially compared to Serene's form-fitting clothes, soft and green as moss. Especially if all the leather-clad people were colonial oppressors. I'm a wave chaser, you know, Surfer Dude added proudly. Dale Wave Chaser. Ha! Dale Wave Chaser frowned. Sorry? Nothing, said Elliot. Mocking people who didn't get it was kind of pointless, like throwing sharp weapons into pudding. Dale returned to his favorite subject. Of course, the Wave Chasers aren't anything compared to the Sunborns, he said. They were the first family. They held the border on their own for a generation. There are songs about them. The Shining Ones, the Golden Guard, the Laughing Warriors. The Sunborn family is an army unto itself. Even their women are soldiers, and the Sunborn woman is as good as any man. Cool. No video games and outdated gender politics, Elliot muttered. Serene looked totally perplexed. Dale continued to making cheerful oblivion an art form. Whenever there's a Sunborn acting as commander of the border guard, we cannot lose. Luke is the great Trigon champion Eleanor Sunborn's nephew, you know. He was taken to his father Michael Sunborn's last post with him and trained with him personally for 3 years. They say he's shaping up to be one of the best Sunborn of his generation. I was so excited to meet him today. Elliot raised his eyebrows. Congratulations. I'm sure you will be very happy together. So Blondie was basically the scary warrior equivalent of a trust fund kid, the kind who had their pictures in the paper on the regular, one of life's born winners, and golden luck to go with the golden hair. No wonder he was glaring over at Elliot, looking betrayed and unhappy as a wet cat, as if nothing like being laughed at had ever happened to him before. The elven clans do not pay heed to the brief fame and even briefer lives of men, remarked Serene. She was a stone-cold elven fox. Tell me about your clan, Elliot invited her. Elves apparently lived in the four woods that stretched across the other lands, in linked family groups never more than a day's ride from another clan. Of all these clans in the wood, if you believed Serene, and Elliot absolutely did, the Chaos Clan was the most notorious. Serene launched into a long tale of bloodshed, kidnapping gentlemen, highwaywomen, and forsworn oaths. The Chaos Clan were rogues. Elliot was so into it. Dale Wavechaser wandered off at some point early on, which was his loss. Serene was actually laughing at one of Elliot's jokes, her pale face bright as the sun on snow, and her dark hair swinging into her face, when Captain Woodsinger approached them and said, her voice very dry, "Schaefer, chaos of battle. Have you made any decisions about whether you are staying or going?" Elliot looked around the clearing, which was largely empty. Most of the kids in jeans and hoodie like him were long gone. He vaguely recalled seeing the kid who had cried over video games leading the way. Sadly, a group of Elliot's kids' age remained, mostly the ones wearing leather, with Luke Sunborn at the head of the group and Dale Wavechaser circling him like an exciting moon. "It is a very different world than the one you are accustomed to," Captain Woodsinger observed. Elliot thought she was talking to him until she added, "We have never had a female elf wish to join the border camp, though of course we have heard of the elves' legendary prowess in battle. You may be surprised and dismayed by the reactions of those around you, which you will consider unnatural, and your lady mother has expressed serious reservations about your behavior in joining up." Serene tossed her dark hair. "My mother was the wildest elves in the wood until she met my father," she said. "I can have an adventure of my own. Anyone who thinks I am not the equal to, and more than equal to any human challenge will soon realize their mistake." Elliot regarded her with his chin propped on his fist, and sighed dreamily. "And you, Schaefer?" Phones exploded here, and there was way more nature than Elliot was comfortable with, but there were mermaids and harpies, and also true love. Besides, it wasn't like there was much to go back to. "I'm in," said Elliot, "for the non-fighting course. I want to read books and never, ever to fight. I'm a pacifist." "A what?" asked Dale Wavechaser. Elliot stared at him, then over to Blondie. "What I am attempting to communicate," he explained to the captain, "is that I want to be anywhere that guy is not." He pointed to Blondie, who he felt was a helpful illustration of everything Elliot did not like in human form. Luke Sunborn stared at him in outrage, and Elliot used his pointing hand to give him a little wave. "I think that can be arranged," Captain Woodsinger said dryly. "Welcome to the border camp, Cadet Schaefer." "Cadet?" Elliot repeated. "Ah ha ha. Okay." Elliot began to regret his decision as soon as he was separated from Serene and sent off to his sleeping quarters. His sleeping quarters were a large bare wooden cabin with several bunk beds and chests full of clothes and, oh good, weapons. There were already other boys there, and 2 of them were conducting a fight with daggers. Elliot saw no evidence anywhere of plumbing, and it was freezing cold in the magic land. Elliot had never given much thought to the importance of plumbing and indoor heating, and he'd never wanted to long passionately for double glazing. Magic lands and books had always seemed close to nature, but in a nice way, without all those unpleasant details. A dagger landed in the wall far too close to him. "Oh no," Elliot moaned and sat down heavily on his bunk bed. "This is magic Sparta." And that is the end of the first part. This was, again, In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. Fantastic book. Also very queer, which was not entirely evident in the first chapter, but believe me, it gets there. If you want to know what happens next, go check out the book on our website, portersquarebooks.com. Again, In Other Lands, Sarah Reese Brennan. And I hope you enjoyed this. We will see you again tomorrow night with another story. And good night. Stay safe.